tongue is numb, the current's clean, your dog is dead, it's a Ponzi Scream. Ponzi Scream, Ponzi Scream, because it's just something to do.
Oh, things you should know immediately. Gabe, not here. David, looks like shit. Danny, feeling great. That's order of operations today. End of the year. Ugh, 2020 sucks.
Yeah, it was really bad. It for a lot of people, but it was fine for rich people largely. It's just kind of
Writ large, they were fine.
it was fine. It really was. Like the stock market really you see recent headlines now which are like, chronic unemployment for the underclass of America, art institutions looking like they'll never come back. A look back at like your favorite dive bars that survived the Korean War is never coming back. And
No,
but the stock market better than ever, baby. Better than ever.
Doing great. Doing great.
Yeah. Feeling
actually,
great, looking great.
Culturally, this is maybe you can dive into your own mind palace for a second and think to yourself, when do you think was the first year you heard somebody be like, ugh, fuck 2012 or fuck this? Like, think back. When was the first time you really heard that?
It was really around like when Black Lives Matter really started heating up, I think 2014, 2015. I mean, Obama's second term was bleak. It was really there was a lot going on internationally, and the rest of it, he couldn't even get a judge appointed. He couldn't get an SEC commissioner appointed for a while. He just nothing was getting done, and he was getting all these crazy executive orders passed to make us feel like something was happening, like that immigration executive order, that clean power plan executive order, all this stuff. And it was really in the meanwhile, like we were all just listening to like shoegaze, heroin induced Beach House and Drake, and just like there was just so much malaise in those years. I remember just feeling so much dread and anxiety. And then every once in a while there would be a snuff film on live TV, like that was just circulated everywhere. Like that's what it was. That's what we were watching. It's just like every couple months there would be a snuff film of an unarmed black man or woman getting killed. Or there would be like a mass shooting, which is not that they usually wouldn't have a footage of it, but it was still like, and really like in the years right after Trayvon Martin, with like Eric Garner, and the list goes on and on and on and on, and those were bad years. And I remember people being like, 2014, not a great year, 2015, but there was still people felt like, Obama's president, and and it was really 2016 was the year where everyone was like, this is a bad year.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right about that, because the first inklings of it seem to be sort of creeping into the discourse. If you want to go absolute earliest, 2011, maybe somebody randomly goes like, ugh, so bad, or whatever on Twitter or whatever, doesn't think twice about it. It's not a huge cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, and there was good reason for 2009, 2010 to be bad. There's a huge financial crisis. We were still in like active belligerence in two countries in war. Then it kind of became smart warfare and brushed under the table. But like, and then like ISIS happened in 2014 and 2015. I think
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
That also just really made those years feel like, oh my God, we are dealing with like, Al Qaeda meets Hitler, and like there was just this like sense of like, this is like the newest, biggest, baddest, horrible thing. And like Ebola, the scariest disease on earth.
Yes.
To this day, still the scariest thing. And so there was a lot of like fear. There was, that was going on in those 2014 and 2015. And then 2016, really Trump came the first half of 2015. And then he really got his rocks off in 2016, and all the celebrities dying,
The celebrity deaths.
the
Yes.
celebrity deaths. It was like I must say, like, it was uncanny. It was so strange just how many of them were, and so how many of them were very life affirming people. Like Prince and Bowie, Alan Rickman. Those three I always group together. And
Robin Williams.
Rob-
Robin Williams was
no,
a
he
big
was
one.
he was earlier, wasn't he? Though
Was he 2015?
I think he was a little earlier. I think
He might have been. He might have been.
I
I
don't-
mean, very, very close. But
Leonard
Yeah, you're right.
Cohen died that year.
Alan Rickman.
Alan Rickman. Alan.
Mr. Potter, put your penis in my butt, Mr. Potter.
I liked him. And who else was there? I don't know. Those things on top really was what started the kind of like, 2016, and then obviously when Trump got elected, that kind of made the cherry on the ice cream or whatever. Yeah, it
check.
just
Yeah.
made the whole thing
Yeah.
horrible. So that's when it started. 2017.
2016, 2017.
And then so then like in the intervening Trump years, there hasn't been as much like like every year's been bad because Trump's been in office, but things have generally been not so bad in the culture, right? Like people
Culture's been back and it's been back and forth. It's had a malaise through the entire time just because you're right, because like Donald Trump is there. But I think what I was sort of getting at was just like people, it's now just like a cultural affectation, sort of like a 55-year-old guy calling literally anybody who has ever drank a latte a hipster, like that.
Right.
Like it's taken on that feeling.
it's getting abused. It's getting abused.
Yes, it's getting beaten to death.
Yeah,
It's getting beaten
absolutely.
to death.
So it's not
Yeah.
necessarily even that it's wrong. 2020 was a horrible year, and 2016 was also a horrible year. But it's just that annoying people using it in ways that are annoying. It's just kind of the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, it's right up there with freaks who call living their life adulting. It's right up there with people who are like, I think it's worse than the epic bacon people, actually. Like, because that still is just there's something comical about that, and it's in its sense, because if you see somebody in 2020 doing epic bacon, genuinely and really, there is a bit of celebration to it. Like, you kind of know in the back of their head. I mean, they do like red meats, so I'd be like, whatever. They like a nice BLT or a club sandwich. Like, that seems to be a fun thing for them, But when somebody's like complaining about something as amorphous about like the end of a year, it adds sort of a weird kind of existential dread
The
to
annoying
it.
thing about it, the really thing that I don't like, is when brands start doing it, or when like outlets start doing it. Just it's like, we know this has been a shit fucking year, and that's why we at Visa are offering you 5.1% interest rates for all home buyers who purchase through a Visa Rewards Plus program. And like
we'd like to announce that it's not just the 12 days of Honda days. It's the we're taking the Honda days and we're sending them right into January.
Yeah.
If you're a Capricorn, you're getting a deal. It's gonna be great for you.
It's so 2020 though was very bad objectively. I mean, 325,000 people have died from coronavirus.
Correct.
And much more globally, and all of just all the other horrible things that have happened this year. There have been so many horrible things, and for Wall Street, really, it was just an inconvenient year, and it was kind of the year that Wall Street, I think, got woke. and started feeling guilty about
Mm-hmm.
things because
Mm-hmm.
this happened before the coronavirus kicked in when BlackRock CEO Larry Fink wrote this letter saying, we are going to incorporate climate change into all of our $8 trillion in assets.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in January. So it was on their mind. And it's not just coronavirus, but really coronavirus accelerated Wall Street's feeling like we need to do something to feel relevant. We need to do something in order to feel like this, like we are noblesse oblige, like we can provide a beneficial, landlord essentially like over the economy and a stewardship over the economy. And that's why there was all this marketing about how we're here for you. We know this is tough. Like all the
Mm-hmm.
emails that you have with
Mm-hmm.
anyone, like I hope I hope this finds you well in these tough times. And that's just two white collar people working from home and getting seamless every day. And
Yes, absolute. Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like it's probably finding you okay, right? And Wall Street really shifted its tone away from the kind of like Friedman go fuck yourself. I'm taking mine ideology in favor of that. And I think that it's not just coronavirus. I really think that were it not for the emergence of grassroots efforts over the past like decade, right? The past decade, I can't tell you how many Black Lives Matter marches, climate change marches, and like general
Yeah.
like DSA events I've been to. And those three things I think really finally pierced the corporate veil. I used that word incorrectly or whatever, but like that finally got to people's heads in Wall Street to say, "Hey, we need to do something, otherwise people are going to
Yeah.
overthrow us."
Yeah, kind of an analog to it. It's the equivalent of BP and Shell being like, we're gonna actually start really talking about electric vehicles, but still do all the horse shit that we do in the background. But our face is like the EVs and climate change,
Mhm.
and you're right. It's the move was definitely there, and there was a tonal shift. By the way, listener, David and I, we're talking about the year in review. We'll talk a little bit about some of our favorite stories that we went, but we're just kind of jamming, trying to just talk about just how we feel, about everything that's happened. And again, as we are, a white collar financial crimes podcast, we're kind of taking sort of the theme that even though that 2020 was, as people like to say, like, when a dumpster fire, that many people in the financial sector, people like Larry Fink, was that his name?
Yeah.
Larry Fink, large. Everything that happened this year for them was more of a speed bump, or
Yeah.
a traffic
And it
ticket more.
forced them to kind of, change their policies and procedures to now that people are going to be like rethinking whether I need to wear a suit and go from Connecticut to Lower Manhattan every day, you know?
Oh yeah.
And now all these, now like corporate America, I mean, who I really in the white collar sector who's going to take a real blow from this huge shift in our pivot in this economy is going to be the commercial real estate sector. And
Yes.
the commercial real
Yes.
estate sector is going to suffer from this. And it's a perfect time. The coronavirus outbreak was a perfect time for Hudson Yards to be completed for so many fun, nice reasons. Not only was it like completely irrelevant before coronavirus happened, but now it is just disgustingly irrelevant. There's just so much commercial office space that will never ever be used. And there is just so much commercial office space that will have to be converted to housing or something because it will never fill up again. We are going to have
Yeah.
so many empty skyscrapers.
Well, not even that, but no, literally.
Filled with
Um.
Legionnaire's disease, also, by the way, because people don't
Ooh.
get the water running. So there's just going to be stagnant water everywhere. And it's just going to be like empty glass towers full of disease. No one.
Full of cholera and
Yeah.
horse shit.
Yeah.
No, there. I mean, not only was Hudson Yards basically like, completed in this time, but also, fucking those two buildings right on 58th Avenue, or 58th Street,
Oh, those are
that are
personal.
like
Those are personal buildings, right?
they are, but they're also just I mean, they're still
Residential.
huge yeah, residential. Yeah, they're still giant skyscrapers.
Oh yeah.
Which is, the skyscraper in itself is a very interesting metaphor because oftentimes they get made in times of like intense prosperity, but because ostensibly they are just sort of like a fucking like like it's all hubris.
Did we talk about?
No.
I don't remember if we talked about this, but I watched this like clip about how there's some people, economic theorists, who tie when a depression will happen to when there's a big peak in skyscraper building. So
Yeah, yeah,
there's more skyscrapers being built. That's the sign that a depression is coming, and that
yeah.
you need to be careful about it. And they go through all these like examples of when that is. And I mean,
Yeah, well, a skyscraper, I mean, like you could build one, It's not like it's a crazy I mean, it is an engineering feat that is like, wow, a skyscraper, that's really cool. You have to use metal. You can't I mean, it's funny to say okay, I said that wrong. But it's like a skyscraper is a thing of the 20th century because in 19th century and stuff, buildings were more often made of brick, and the
Right.
structural soundness of brick stops after you reach a certain like floor level. Like it just becomes impractical to make a building out of brick after like 10 floors. Then you have to, if you do that, you have to have walls that are insanely thick because the building material,
it's just not going to happen.
it says it doesn't hold up.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some complications to like using I-beams and like steel and iron and all that shit to physically hold up a skyscraper. But the other thing that goes along with it is because all those things, they cost a fuck ton of money,
Yeah.
and the upfront cost is so much, it means that you inevitably need a fucking very rich backer, or often a conglomerate
Right.
of backers, and
Right.
you only get people doing that when you've got not. I'm speaking pretty broadly here, but there's usually some pretty unfortunate income equality when you've got people who are able
Right.
to afford those kinds of
And
things.
it's very risky and it's very capital intensive, and so you're really taking out. You like if you're an investor, you might be like really over leveraging yourself in order to invest in this sort of a skyscraper, and it's a really big permanent investment in a city to be able to do something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's super permanent. It's gonna stay. I mean, the idea is that it'll stay in a fucking plot of land, a plot of land for 100 years. Like that's what they're building for. And if, especially if you're building like a modern skyscraper where it's really, really tall, you actually have to fill up all the office space in it too if it's not all residential. It gets really what's that thing where people they invest in something, real estate it gets really speculative
Totally.
after a certain point.
Absolutely. It does get really speculative. And those who speculate on Hudson Yards will ultimately look like the biggest losers in 21st century real estate. I mean, you will have things like that, but because not only is Hudson Yards a failure, but the entire Midtown Manhattan area is going to have to be rethought now that there's all these people who are going to be working full-time remote, or maybe going to the office 1 or 2 days a week, something like that.
Yeah.
They'll stagger out the office space, and you're not going to need as much meeting space and you're not going to need as many like cool hangout spots for you to like take your clients or whatever. This sort of culture is going to severely diminish as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. I really do think so. I don't think that people are going to fully go back to it. I think some people are going to want to go back to commuting, going back to the office a few days a week, but it's not going to be nearly as robust. And you're going to see corporate America cutting down on their leases, trying to sell their mortgages or whatever for their commercial office space and significantly shrink it, and so demand is just going to plummet, and all these uh, anyone who owns these buildings is just going to suffer so much from that permanently. It is a permanent
Yeah.
adjustment to the economy.
Yeah, it's going to be not only that, but yeah, I think a lot of people have it sort of restarts a lot of the arguments and concessions that people have gotten for their, for the benefit, like things that were sort of mutually agreed upon throughout industry. For example, one thing that's super annoying right now is that if you were a person who commuted to work every day or whatever, and you did live in a city where you had, mass transit like New York City, something that you could potentially finagle out of your boss was like a transit pass. That was like,
Right.
that was a thing that you could get. And that's going to be harder now to get that. But then you also have the weird kind of theoretical and also infrastructural possibilities for the future where it's like, well, okay, if you're some rich weirdo who lives in Hartford, Connecticut, or even if you're just a guy, you're one of the strange people that I deliver to who are like a millionaire, but they live in like, a part of the southern Bronx, which by the way is a lot. There's a weird conglomeration of people who like live in Manhattan they're like trying to gentrify the Bronx in a weird way.
Yeah.
It's very
They've been
so like
trying.
they live there, and it's very odd. But you're gonna have this question now where it's like, are those people who have that influence, are they gonna be like, well, now part of my my package in being here is you have to pay for 200 megabit per second internet for my house.
That's gonna have to be the next concession that like
That's gotta be it.
employees are gonna have to, white collar workers are gonna have to fight for, is trying to like, not only you pay for a portion of my internet, you pay for a portion of my electricity, you pay a portion of my heat, and also if I have to get a separate office for my apartment, you're paying for the extra bedroom.
Yeah, you're paying for the meeting or the office thing, and it's
that's
like
5 years away. Like, you are not going to get those agreements worked out. First off, unless you have a union. Second off, in order to collectively bargain for it, for them to pay for your real estate. I mean, that's something you really would have to fight for collectively. And second off, that's a long ways away. In the meantime, corporate America is just going to make a lot of money on reduced real estate costs. I mean, so much money. That's part of the reason why, for them to say that this has been a shit year and this transition is tough, is so disingenuous. I really think that they'll succeed. They'll end up. A lot of folks will come out on top from this.
They're gonna succeed. Dude, there's so many things up in the air, which is it's funny because you are right. They're gonna pay a lot less in real estate for sure, but there are going to be so many, like I said, so many infrastructural snafus. Like these people do not know how a fucking Ethernet cable works. All right, they pay IT guys, sometimes teams of them, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just so they can tell them you need to restart your modem and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be a weird. Not like I think I'm on their side. I mean, fuck them, obviously. But that's going to be a big thing for, I think, a lot of us, where we're going to hit this weird brick wall of reality as well, where it's like they're going to save money on real estate, and then they're going to be like, "Oh shit, I hired Max, the guy who to make sure that all the systems are set up in our office perfectly, and I don't have him anymore. I need to get no, this isn't right, So we're gonna see this like whole reversal in like what's normal, what's paid for, what isn't,
Right.
And I think the one thing you could probably assume is that the people on the bottom are going to be the last if they do see it ever,
Oh yeah, I mean, all of this stuff is about how it's going to affect the white collar sector, and then like the after effects are going to be like, okay, we're going to have, how is this going to affect delivery workers? How is this going to affect food workers, restaurant workers, and like the restaurant sector in Midtown? You think about like people, are they going to just be permanently going to conferences remotely now?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
all the workers who work in the restaurant, like at the conferences, at the hotels, at the restaurants that rely on that conference, those flights and stuff like that. Those people all of a sudden might be seeing less money coming in, might be seeing fewer jobs. I mean, all of this is not about the bottom 50% of America, which owns, zero stocks, bonds, or securities or of any kind, no retirement
Yeah.
savings whatsoever. That is, in America, we've really come to a almost a 50-50 stratification, wherein there are the top 50% of people who have money invested in a retirement account or some other part of investments in Wall Street, and then there's the bottom half which do not,
Mm-hmm.
and like literally nothing saved and like or invested. They might have savings, but there's literally nothing invested in retirement or any other account,
Yeah.
which is insane. But that is kind of the bifurcation of our economy that we're seeing. And the bottom half is not who we're talking. We're talking about the top half.
Yeah. It's great. It's crazy how much they get catered to. Again, it'll all be, if we get anything, it'll just be weird. Like Manhattan, you gotta imagine Manhattan is wired probably better than Brooklyn. Like literally wired better. There's more. You have
Mhm.
more offices. You have faster internet and stuff like that. It's gonna be so hilarious when when people start realizing where they start like some loser CEO or COO who gets paid $150,000 a year is in his old loft apartment in fucking downtown Brooklyn, at 100 Willoughby or something like that.
Nice.
Yeah, and they're just sort of like, and they're in their loft space, and they're like, "Why the fuck is the internet so slow?" And it's like, "Because there's less wires here, but bro, the internet is wires. It's
I mean,
literally wires,
there
man."
have to be some serious infrastructural changes to how you're looking at, commercial real estate being converted to residential as well. You need
Yeah.
more bathrooms for starters. Um, so, anyways, it's tough to say. There was a lot of people that came out on top, and it wasn't just Amazon and big tech that came out on top from the pandemic. There's a lot of people who, in the white collar sector, who are going to walk away overall um, stronger than they were before. And this will be, whereas there are other people, the 300,000 dead notwithstanding, who will walk away permanently suffering from this. And that is ultimately kind of like the fallacy of our previous economy, which is basically it's revealing that stock market growth was not dependent on the bottom half of our economy.
Yeah.
The bottom half of our economy is essential workers in a lot of places, but also it's a lot of discretionary spending because that's the only jobs available to blue collar people these days. It's just discretionary spending at restaurants and bars and entertainment and other sort of like ancillary activities like that. But once you have the coronavirus and the stock market's still going up,
Mm-hmm.
what explains for that other than the fact that we realize that it has been completely separate. The stock market has been completely separated from half of America.
It's what you've been saying since we've basically started the podcast, which is that it's a mood ring, and that's important to know. But I mean, that's one of the weird little hidden gems of everything. It's like there's not a lot of good to come out of the coronavirus epidemic. But one of the things is that, like, if you're a regular person and you see, a stock that makes no sense why it's doing good or bad or whatever, and you're like, why is this happening? And everybody around you is going, I'm suffering, I'm not doing well, I might lose my house or something like that. And then news is reporting something to the effect of like this X number of people have lost something, but the stock market's going up. I mean, it makes you think. It
Really
makes you
makes you think. And then
really makes you think.
and then you have things like, we have government bailouts of huge sectors of the economy basically just absorbing risk, which is really like what a like kind of state, like a corporate statist socialism, like what China has, does. Like China Inc., the Communist Party and the government owns like 40% of all
Hmm.
private corporations. And they do that in order to, get some revenues going back to them and get some profits going back to the people or whatever. In theory, I don't know if that's true or not. But also to mitigate risk. And
Yeah.
if you have constant bailouts of corporate America, you are basically, what we're creating is we are doing that to mitigate risk for huge sectors of corporate America, but the people aren't really getting any profits out of it. We're not getting any ownership
No.
stake in it. We're just bailing. That was kind of the big kerfuffle with the bailouts in the first place. Frankly, what was kind of one of the few, righteous angers of the Tea Party movement, which is like these bailouts are a bad deal for us.
Yeah.
And
It's maybe we're getting to the point where we can actually get an interesting deal on the table. I say this is hear me out on this.
okay,
First thing you do out of this, you think to yourself, okay, what is the basic necessity of a society? A, to make it so people have something they can eat, and B, so they're not shitting in the streets. Okay, those are two things. Those are two big things. What you do,
well, I mean ROI also. Come on, return on investment.
sure, yes,
Yeah.
yes, and maybe people could live somewhere. But point being, point being, you don't want people shitting in the streets, and you want people to not go hungry. You nationalize every Chipotle and every Starbucks. All right, Starbucks becomes the national bathroom. It just becomes the
Yeah,
bathroom.
I love it.
Chipotle too. Chipotle too, for that matter. They could both become the national bathroom. We immediately solve the problem of and like, come on, what's that gonna cost? What do these franchises cost each? $1 million? What? Okay, what? There's 1,000. What is there? 1,000 Chipotles in America? How many Chipotles are in America? I gotta find this out.
I think there's more than 1,000. I mean, it's probably just to buy every single Chipotle at market value, which
Yeah,
is what the government would be required to do under the Fifth Amendment. We would. I mean, I'm sure it would be somewhere around $3 trillion, right? Come on, it's probably
no. Okay, there's 2,718 Chipotles. All right.
okay,
Uh,
and
there's
they're not all priced the same. I love this
yeah.
idea. I love this idea of nationalizing Chipotle. I think this is the first priority that we all need to be getting at. I mean, what I would just be worried about is that we don't want to use that as an excuse to cut food stamps, Danny, because once you make,
That's true.
you don't want to just have people just eating Chipotle all day, every day. You want to be able to allow people to get fruits and vegetables and make a carnitas burrito of their own.
Look, okay, it's a too much. Okay, we take this. You take the salt content, you drum that down a lot. There's a lot of salt in Chipotle. I'm not gonna lie. Every single menu item has the little salt shaker icon next to it, which
Oh yeah,
means it is more than your
good. Which
daily.
means it's good.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But look, there's a Chipotle probably in Casper, Wyoming. That's probably only worth $150,000.
Right.
There's probably one in Midtown Manhattan that's worth $4 million. You buy every one of them for $1 million. That's literally $2.7 billion. That's all you got to spend. What is that? One tank, one Sherman tank for all the Chipotles to nationalize the Chipotles?
Yeah, I think if we just just didn't pay the military for a year, we could buy every Chipotle in America.
Dude, we don't even have to dude, the military budget was what,
100
700
billion.
billion? You could, like, dude, I'll go fucking nutty with it. Every Chipotle's worth $3 million. Then that what? Then that means nationalizing all of them costs $7 billion? Come on. Come
Wow,
on.
this is an unimpeachable argument. I mean, I got nothing. I got no response. It's perfect. It's a perfect national solution. But there
Dude,
is
let's round it up to 10 billion, man. Come on.
but it is just to get back to the point. Like there is just constantly risk is being thrust onto the lower class. Lack of ownership is onto the lower class, and growth is being denied to the lower class, the lower 50%. And it's weird how it has become a 50-50 split in so many in so many different instances. Um, and I don't know. I don't know what else to think about it other than we've created just such a weird Frankenstein of an economy. There's not really a specific ideology to which it adheres. There is a form of like, I think running through all of it is kind of a like, Reaganomics, wherein we reward,
Yeah,
corporate, kind of a corporate socialism kind of thing everywhere. But there's so many weird behemoth structures that have no real um, purpose other than just kind of a stopgap duct tape measure. That's just weird, and we don't know what to do with it other than just that someone lobbied for it and they got it.
it kind of is like it's sort of like a metaphorical skyscraper, because the idea is you build a skyscraper in intense times of inequality and growth, and theoretically it's supposed to be able to withstand a lot of force and, like, just be able to support itself. But if your economy and your whole your country, it runs off of bastardized fumes that don't really work and stuff, and that skyscraper isn't being maintained or whatever, like, how long does it take before it does just fall over?
Right.
Like, eventually, shit will collapse in one way or another.
Right. Here's to that. Let's go through um some of the good stories from this year that we covered. And I want to start with one of my favorites, which was former eBay employees threatening uh, a couple with anonymous email threats, Twitter threats, delivering them live cockroaches, a bloody Halloween pig mask, a funeral wreath, and a book on surviving a spouse's death. They sent pornography to the couple's name to neighbors and conducted covert surveillance to emotionally and psychologically terrorize them. These are security directors of eBay, and it seems like the CEO may have what they don't know whether he knew about it, whether he was involved in it. Devin Wenig, uh,
Yeah.
and Wenig apparently made, quote, inappropriate communications, but there was no evidence he had advanced knowledge of or authorized the actions against the couple. These couple, what they did, they wrote a bad they wrote like a bad blog post about them, like about eBay.
Yeah.
I mean, just amazing.
Yeah, very vindictive. Did you say there was a pig mask? Did you say something
A
about that?
bloody pig mask.
Bloody
A
pig
bloody
mask. Yeah.
pig mask was used against them.
Yeah, so I tried to look up this story. All of the original stories are from June, which is when that originally happened.
Yeah.
So I was looking for the most recent version of it, and it does say that the two employees were indicted.
Yes.
Two former employees were
Yes.
indicted.
Indicted.
Yeah, so that means, yeah, we're indicted on a charge by grand jury that they did participate. So that did happen.
They're writing an online newsletter that these people viewed as critical of the e-commerce company of eBay. Okay,
yeah.
I'm just blown away that, like, can you imagine being like in an eBay meeting with these security guys and they're just like, okay, who's Paulie and who's Christopher, and them just kind of playing mafia with themselves and working themselves up into uh this feeling like they need to be like Goodfellas or like The Godfather Part 1 with this shit, and send them a bloody pig mask to these bloggers, these newsletter people.
I think it's just dudes being bros. Really, it's dudes being guys. Just very,
True.
you know who your homies are,
True.
who are really willing to stand by you. Which I think is really cool. Like I said, it does look like they were indicted, which is not good for them. But that was honestly, like you said, it's a favorite of this year because it's just so wild. It's just it's like that kind of energy is
We need more
very.
of it.
We need more of
This
it.
economy needs more of that kind of energy.
It's very antithetical to anything Joe Biden would ever stand for. Like everybody like, yeah, he gets in an occasional kerfuffle where he calls, his nemesis jerks or whatever. But like you said, it really gets into some high soprano energy, where people are just sort of like, let's just fucking do it. It's one of those let's just fucking do it moments.
Let's just
So
fucking do it. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely, man. It's one of those scenes in a movie where they're all doing drugs in order to like amp themselves up to get stoked to go commit like a really petty crime.
Lot of amping up.
Yeah.
So much amping up going on
So
here.
that was a good story. Another good story was an investment advisor who is in the middle of a $35 million Ponzi scheme, tried to escape the FBI using a small submersive device. A small submersive
Yes.
device. It wasn't just a rabbit. We're talking about like a little submarine thing that he could get around. Like it was like this, like it could move. I don't know. It's a handheld submarine, like a Yamaha thing, and he tried to get around it. And I think the best part of this story, which is I think it leads itself to one of the top, one of my favorite stories, is he is trying to escape the feds in the lake. I don't remember what the Lake Tahoe, I think, and Lake
Yeah.
Shasta, in Lake Shasta, and he abandons his truck there and swims into the lake, and he's underwater, and the law enforcement could only see bubbles, and he's in the frigid water for 25 minutes. And when he emerges, law enforcement discover that he had this device, and apparently the cops had his clothes because
Yes.
his
Yeah.
wife gave them to the cops because
Yeah.
she ultimately didn't have faith in his escape.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm all about, as a man who watches a lot of YouTube car chases, I'm rooting for this guy.
Yeah.
Ultimately I'm rooting for him. You always watch the videos where the car being chased is the guy who doesn't have a license plate or some other kind of identifying mark on them. So they have a greater chance of getting away. But buddy, it's a lake. It's contained. And the bubbles, man, you're literally, it's like you're leaving breadcrumbs behind you. You can't do that. That's,
Yeah. Get
I
yourself
mean,
a Yamaha that allows you to not breathe.
exactly. I mean,
Get yourself some gillyweed or something like that.
I literally watched that movie the other day. Harry Potter 4, for anybody wondering. I wanted to watch all of them again.
That was a really good story. Another good story was the one where the guy defrauded the CIA. I think that was maybe one of my favorite stories of the year. We interviewed the author, who is just this great journalist, Howard Blum. He covered this story about this man, and this is in the New York Times. He conned the Beltway. This man got access to these secret rooms that gave him some sort of cover to pretend that he was in a deeper version of whatever national security apparatus that anyone else was in. And he used that in order to secure contracting and financing and pseudo favors for people, basically. And just an
Yes.
amazing con, multi-year. It involved just all these these sensitive compartmented information facilities, all-star cast of intelligence officials, former like generals, 2-star generals, all these, just like so much, like crazy amounts of money going through. This is all in the
Oh, yeah.
740 whatever $billion in the defense budget. It's going to all sorts of people, and this guy, this patriot, Garrison Kenneth Courtney, was found a way to make a buck off of it. And this guy just made a lot of money off of this, pretending to be in the deep state. Bravo,
Yeah.
bravo.
Very, very good. Is there any follow up on that guy? Like, is there any? Do we have any new information
So
on
I know that in June he pled guilty to a single count of wire fraud and agreed to repay his victims at least $4.4 million. But
Mhm.
that's not as much as he took. That's a cost of doing business, man. That guy walked out. That guy walked out in the black for sure. And there were
Yeah.
yeah.
Again, this is the kind of energy that I condone. This is like I like seeing this. I want to see what kind of crazy shit you're going to be able what kind of restaurant you're going to make with your cocaine money. Like, please, please do it, because you're just taking the cracks in the system and just like shredding them apart.
This
Like
is like
let's see what happens.
I mean, this guy is like the Big Short in some ways. Actually, he's kind of like these kind of like Big Short kind of guys who really loves to. They see a flaw in the system, and instead of trying to fix it, they exploit it for personal gain.
Hmm.
And but in this instance, he couldn't have like tried to fix it. There was no way he was going to fix this. All he's going to do is just take some money and prevent it from being used to build an F-35 or being used,
Yeah.
right? Like all the money that he took, I mean, he's just on October 23rd, Garrison Courtney apparently appeared for sentencing in federal district court in Virginia, could get a maximum 20-year sentence. Yeah.
Yeah,
Could
yeah,
get
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
20-year sentence. But you know what, man? He's just still got more deals that he's trying to do. I mean, even after he pled guilty to the fraud charge in June, Mr. Courtney had launched a new variation of his old scheme. I mean, he was claiming that he was a burned agency asset whose cover had been inadvertently blown by the FBI investigation. He tried to strike a deal to deliver a classified sole source government contract to a new company. I mean, that's just all he does, and it's amazing. I just gotta respect Mr. Courtney for the hustle, and that's some good shit, man. I mean, he's
Dude, he's all in again. Again.
yeah. So that's some good shit. Another good story from this year that I really liked. I think we got to talk about Robin Hood. Just
Of course,
because
yeah.
it just came out, but there's an update actually. Robin Hood, in addition to last year in 2019, they got fined by FINRA for like $1.5 million. Then they got fined by the Massachusetts regulator. I don't remember how much for, but they got sued. There's a complaint filed against them. So there's no damages have been alleged yet. And the SEC, they settled something with the SEC for $65 million. Now they're facing a class action lawsuit. Um, a complaint filed for almost the exact same thing. Similar allegation to a case that had just settled with the SEC. So a class action lawsuit. Anyone who's invested in Robinhood, from what I understand from the time frame that they're involved in, can cling on to get some more money, right? And it's just amazing. I mean, it just keeps going against them.
Yeah. Robin Hood, maybe the most legitimate feeling of the tech sector, getting, revolutionizing or innovating their way into the much more let's see,
Dodgy financial sector.
regulated but also dodgy financial sector,
Yeah.
and really just falling in it at this point.
Oh yeah. Oh, for
Shit
sure.
just keeps getting worse for them, and I'm all for it. I want to see how far down this rabbit hole goes.
I mean, I think that it's kind a little bit of a bellwether for all of tech trying to enter the financial sector. Like Facebook trying to launch their cryptocurrency this year, they just totally got their ass chewed by regulators, but then they just completely readjusted their attempts, and basically now they're trying to launch something pretty different and very scaled back, but that could still happen. And if they launch their kind of stable coin cryptocurrency that they're looking to launch, which has some tacit approval from some lawmakers globally, but not all, they could just face the exact same shit. And all these tech companies who are trying to get into the financial sector think that they can get easy money from doing that. But that's what everyone who goes into finance thinks. And
Don't
just
do
because
it.
you have an innovative platform doesn't mean that the underlying principles aren't there. You can't it's very exciting. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with Robinhood. I mean, they're going to just this is just going to keep going. And their entire business model is framed on the underlying fraud or the underlying law breaking that's being alleged against them, which is this best execution stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
this best execution stuff is all saying that they need to deliver the trade as a broker when the person asks them to, right? When the
Yes.
customer asks them to. But they don't do that, and that's their entire business model is not doing that.
Yeah, it's built around not doing
Yeah,
that.
it's
Yeah.
built around not doing that because they sell it to third parties, intermediaries who make some money off of it in various ways. And then they finally execute it days later. And this class action alleges that they actually misled their investors when they told them that it was executed when it was not. Um, just amazing, classy stuff.
Does it say how many people are involved in the class action?
I don't know. It doesn't. I don't think it says, but I mean, if you think about how many users are involved in Robinhood between a certain
Millions.
right. I mean, anyone was in it in a certain time frame, I can't see it right now. I think in theory could qualify for it. I'd have to look it up. So, and I don't want to do that. It's December 29th, folks.
Folks, it's December 29th.
It's 2020, guys. I don't have time to look up the details. We don't have the energy for that. It's hell year, right? So, anyways, there's some other things that we should be on the lookout for next year. Not quite as fun of stuff, but some crazy stuff happened with these FinCEN files. We talked about that a lot. The
Yeah.
FinCEN files was, as a reminder, was from the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, all talking about how the U.S. government ignores suspicious activity reports from international banking agencies. And when they do that,
Yes.
so international banking agencies have an obligation to report them, but there's no obligation to follow up on them. And there is just huge amounts of them that never get followed up on. Some of that for good reason, because it's actually just a report that's filed because, out of an abundance of caution and there's no actual rule breaking. But oftentimes from these reports, it is. And one of the big ones was discovering that gold is used as the biggest, I guess, money laundering device
Yeah.
globally, or the flow of dirty money. Huge.
Yeah. I remember when we covered the FinCEN files, I think my biggest takeaway from that was sort of the same. It's sort of the same feeling you get when you are maybe oh, I want to buy a house or whatever, and you're talking to a dealer, broker or something, and and they show you a very beautiful house, and they say beautiful house built in 2009, good materials, and then you say something like, how are the bones on this house? How's the skeletal structure? What's the foundation like? And they're like, it's fine. It's pretty good. It might need a little bit of work, and that when somebody's talking about an internal but very structural part of something like that they're hiding the worst part of it. It's like, say, it doesn't matter if you have a beautiful home if there's no plumbing in it. And that's what I think the FinCEN files felt like to me, where it was, oh no, everything's working fine, it's fine, we don't really check to see if things are legitimate or not. And then, but don't worry about it. It's like, no, there's a huge flaw here. You're not doing this isn't even an auxiliary thing where it's like, oh, I forgot to mark this esoteric type of savings account as this or whatever. It's like, no, we're just not checking for fraud. Yeah, we're just
Yeah.
not doing the thing that banks are. It's like a big deal if
Yeah.
they do. You
And
know,
I don't think that there's going to be too much more that's going to be coming out of the FinCEN files specifically, but I think that from we can tell about what 2020 meant. This is just like the Panama Papers. If you remember that a few years ago, these are these huge. I think there was another one that was similar. These are these huge, explosive whistleblower actions that just reveal how like international global finance is so unregulated and is so much grift and so much hidden money and so much money laundering and all this stuff. And 2020 and the FinCEN files wasn't. It just kind of proved that 2020 wasn't any better or worse than the previous decade, since or 2 decades maybe on this sort of stuff. And it's getting blown up, but this, I mean, made even less of a splash. I mean, this made nothing of a splash, even compared to Panama Papers, which people really forgot about.
yeah,
People forgot about the
No.
Panama Papers, but this, no one even thought about. I didn't see anyone covering this stuff.
no, it's hard to cover. It's one of those things where like you're lucky if a sort of, I don't want to call them prestige, but if like a millennial prestige publication like BuzzFeed does something on it.
Well,
then at least
but BuzzFeed was one of the people who exposed it, right? But
that's
like,
exactly.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you're really lucky if they're the one, if they really do the very good journalistic work of actually doing it
Absolutely.
and putting it out there. And from there, it's just a matter of like, does it stick or not? It doesn't seem like it really, really stuck in this case. I think it could potentially be one of those things, honestly, kind of like Jeffrey Epstein, where, for years, everybody knew this guy's like fucking sketchy and weird and stuff. And for whatever reason, 2019 was the year where it just like
blew up.
finally stuck and he suicided himself to death in a Manhattan correctional facility. By the way, as we're recording this, Ghislaine Maxwell denied bail for $35 million again. So again,
Nice.
that didn't stop existing in 2020. Jeffrey Epstein stuff still happening.
Still happening.
Just in the form of his weird mistress, who did get caught eventually and is now hopefully being denied bail and put in a very well secure and also incredibly monitored area.
Yeah, totally.
No camera failure there, hopefully.
Yeah, she's gonna be okay. I don't know. So
Yeah.
looks like there is next kind of crazy story that happened this year. Speaking of kind of real estate in New York, the Eco Yogi slumlords, they're getting sued again. Amazing. That's the real big update. But we talked about the Eco Yogi slumlords, how these people are basically renting out property, lying about their benefits, and not really like providing their tenants with like livable housing situations. Kind of like soaking up tenant money, using it to like over leverage themselves with these crazy like baby yoga empire sort of stuff. And they're running this huge fraud. And in the meantime, it's this crazy story between the two of them, and they're getting poly, and then they're getting divorced, and then it's just so much. Then these obviously illegal short-term rental operations on Airbnb. Just so much stuff. And now they're getting a second lawsuit. So
I would just, the best way to describe that, it's a bit much. It's a bit much. But that was we didn't have too much of a follow up with them other than what you said, which is like, there's just more legal stuff coming out against them.
Yeah.
Although that was sort of that was kind of the story of, it wasn't the story of the summer, but it was one of the like little annotations along with the kind of like,
well, it's so salacious. It's just so
it's incredibly salacious. It's incredibly salacious, and it was like a really interesting mix between coronavirus and the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
Because because obviously these losers had all of their business stuff exacerbated by coronavirus. And at the other hand, it was the heat and the height of summer. So they, you know, that was right when all the protests were happening.
Right. And it really
So
revealed a lot of the divides that had been simmering in Brooklyn between like, baby yoga Brooklyn and like everyone else.
yeah,
Like Carroll Gardens Brooklyn or Cobble Hill Brooklyn,
yeah. I mean, really,
and the
that's
rest
what
of
it did.
us. And that was kind of one of the crazy. It was very Brooklyn specific in a lot of ways, but in other ways it was reflective of kind of what we were talking about earlier between like the middle class and the upwardly mobile middle class and the like asset holding middle class, the largely white middle class, and the rest of us. I mean, I have a job, but like there's like for the bottom 50% or whatever, like that you got to work for. And that was kind of the big divide that was really, really, really brought forward in the funniest, weirdest, most detailed story that I've seen about these crazy nut polyamorous people. It was a good story, and they're getting sued again. So we'll see how that goes with going into 2021. One or two more quick things that we covered, and that is quickly we covered what happened in Venezuela, and there's a quick update with that, which is that
Yes.
right when we recorded our episode, there were these parliamentary elections that were held. And if we remember what we talked about, we were talking about the ownership of Citgo, which is the gas station that you see all the time in like Connecticut and stuff, which is actually a subsidiary of PDVSA, which is a state-owned firm owned by the Venezuelan state that has been
That's
undergoing
right.
serious sanctions by the United States under the Trump administration, in part because they don't recognize the 2018 elections as fraudulent, and then also in part because, as was revealed through kind of the ownership battles with Citgo, the United States very much wants to privatize Citgo and very much wants
Oh,
to
they'd
get money
love
in it.
it.
And there were Citgo executives who were in the United States, 5 of the 6 of them U.S. citizens, who struck a deal when Citgo was completely, drowning in debt and in trouble, to have some refinancing to get more money, basically, in exchange for, if they default on that, to give up 50% of Citgo. Okay, which effectively means that they weren't ever going to pay that off because they're drowning in debt right now, effectively
Hmm.
giving over the company. And those the Citgo six, got arrested in a Venezuelan prison. They've been in prison for 3 years. And there was, meanwhile, Juan Guaido has been in this awkward position of both being kind of a, Western supporter, or, supported by the West in a lot of ways, but he also has to kind of defend the interests of the Venezuelan state. And so he's kind of in a rock and a hard place where he's like trying to assert that these loans are invalid and defend, kind of PTVSA, but also declaring that the 2018 elections were also invalid. This dude just doesn't think anything's valid. And
He does. He's put, like you said, he's trying to be a little puppet, but also be like, nah, nah,
I'm the
hello,
rightful.
nah, hello, fellow kids. No, no.
Right.
Except what happened? But what? 2 days after we recorded, lost his. If he was the Speaker of the House, he ain't that anymore.
He lost the
He
speakership, right? He lost his part. He lost like essentially being head of the parliament, which is the only thing that he really had going for him. And obviously, like a lot of foreign states had recognized him as the leader of Venezuela, and he was the head of the parliament. And that was indisputed. But now he lost. I mean,
he's not that anymore.
he lost, and Nicolas Maduro allies are going to win a majority from that, from these parliamentary elections. And obviously, people are going to decry them as not kosher, and there was probably say some chicanery going on. But after what happened in 2020, with our elections, really the past 2 presidential elections, what moral high ground do we have to stand on criticizing any electoral processes whatsoever, or really any ever, considering our history and considering our structure that we live in now. So that's going to be something to look for in 2021 with the Biden administration, which I imagine will remain hawkish on Venezuela. They, someone like Elliot Abrams and Bill Richardson, who's a Democrat, I don't imagine either of them straying too far from the Biden line. They both seem relatively, Elliot Abrams is a Republican and more conservative, but I don't really see him straying too far away from that. So that'll be something to look out for. And the last one is related to climate change. California has a new market to hedge against record droughts: water futures. We reported
Yes.
that this was being filed a few months, and then it kind of went viral on certain parts of Twitter recently, and that's because the the basically the first trading began on December 7th for water futures, and this is it's happening now. We are Vele's Water is a financial services firm focused on water. The first day of trading saw 2 buyers secure prices for about 650,000 gallons of water, enough to cover 15 football fields 1 feet deep. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, what is the value of something that is an absolute necessity in every single aspect of life?
If the stock market just kind of going up is the kind of like, oh, this is kind of inhumane and weird, that this everybody's suffering, and yet this big economic thing just is sort of numb to it. Putting water also as a on the stock market as a future, that's just the cherry on top.
Oh,
You
yeah. I
know,
mean, this is it's ultimately like this is a completely inelastic good that is they're trying to create some sort of like elasticity around it, so by some creating some like demand, but demand is constant for water for everyone has this like basically the same equal and high need for water, right? Like so the futures market is trying to buy, which buys investors the right to purchase water at a specific price on a future date, like oil, corn, and other commodities. Um, and they're trying to use it as like a benchmark indicator of water stress in the region. And
uh, what did you know who doesn't? You know who bet? There's people who are shorting water, and it's all like those guys who would play too much, like, League of Legends, who would like they never drink water, and they just be like at like the just be like they'd be like, I believe I will be shorting water today. Like the WoW guys, like,
or like those,
nah.
yeah. I mean, it really unfortunately reminds me of the only okay and slightly classist movie Idiocracy, where they're putting
Yeah.
the Gatorade on the plants and stuff like that, right? But I mean, it is insane to think about that you can buy futures in water when it gets to a certain price, meaning that if water becomes incredibly expensive because there's a drought, people have already locked up the right to have it in the future. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, if and when there's a climate catastrophe, it's already been bought.
But that's also one of the weird things about, the future, where it's like, yeah, you could, it's like, look, if you want to pull some bullshit where you're selling, a theoretical stock at one point in the future for X amount of dollars, okay, whatever. But we are dealing with water. At the end of the day, who controls the water? Well, I guess it's the utility that controls it. So then we get like a situation where people have extreme water scarcity, and they're like, no, 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 don't turn the spigot on for the people. I feel like water futures is just hubris at this point, where it's just like, oh, you're just begging for the guillotine. Like, if you if you try to do this in the future, all you're gonna, it's like no rich people may die, but the guy controlling the water, you know, um, factory, yeah, he will either be like, so sorry to get in your way, angry mob, please have some of the water, you know, or he will get garroted, you know, like he just, you know, so I don't know. In a way, the water futures thing to me almost just seems like a game that like some University of Chicago loser thought up and was like, yeah, we're gonna do this. But it's like you can't try it. Oh, fine, fine. Let's put an armed militia in front of the water utility. Let's see how long they last when an actual armed militia comes out and just destroys them and just is like, and now we will continue to drink water again. You know.
I mean, it is not inevitable that there will be a backlash to this that will result in, some sort of equanimity.
I think you know what? You're right. You're right about
like it could
David.
just-
David, you're right that things can always get worse. I think when it comes to the literal definition of inequality, I think about it from a point where it's called inequality and it's called the minority because it,
there's
it's
less,
not
fewer people.
it's not a lot of people. It's not a lot of people holding wealth. It's thousands of people holding wealth, but it's not millions. And it's certainly not billions for that matter. And I do think there is a question of like, yeah, maybe we'll lose, but it's just like, what happens? What happens when you push people to the point where you're saying like, no, the future water is ours. And then they go, oh, you thought, like, it's like, you think it's yours, So I don't know. It just people keep pushing it, keep seeing what's happening, but
yeah.
keeping it going. And like, look, I don't want violence. I just think it's like, I'm probably not going to be the one to do the violence. I personally like to hide in the corner and look at the violence and see what's happening from a distance.
This is
but,
not something that's going to be happening in 2021, but
no,
it's crazy
not.
that it's beginning. The foundations are being laid already this year, and something that needs to just kind of be like vigorously watched over, because when you get to a point where it's financialized, then you can have people starting to put bets on that, and you can start to having it be deeper and deeper ingratiated into the system, wherein all of a sudden you have like retirement investors who own a small share in this water futures, and they have a retirement incentive to have this one, psycho loony guy to own all the water. And then all of a sudden they're defending him because if they don't, their 401k is going to go down.
Potentially. I mean, it
So,
just depends how out in the open that stuff is.
I mean, if the SEC continues to allow for retail investors and retirement investors to invest in private funds, then it could. I don't know. It's something to think about. I don't know, guys. I don't know, folks. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. You know what? If there's one thing this year has sort of taught me, it's that even when we talk about depressing stuff or whatever, I never feel that bad about. I don't.
You're a maniac.
I don't get gloomy when it comes to this stuff. It's like, yeah, I feel I feel it. Maybe like you listener, I get down in the dumps sometimes, especially when I'm listening to a particularly downtrodden podcast, while I'm delivering on the bicycle. But like, I don't know, talking about it, thinking about it, I still just think I'm glad that people are wiling out in funny ways. I'm glad that's happening. I think it exposes a lot of the inequity. I want people to do it more as long as people aren't getting hurt,
Mm-hmm.
So please continue buying a little like underwater, mini like ski-doo situation.
Yeah, keep buying those submarines, man.
Please keep doing that. Come up with a funny scheme about how to buy, bulk walnuts at Whole Foods, but then like input a banana as the key code.
Yeah.
You know, please keep doing that. I want to see that on bigger levels. And also just remember too that even though you think you're having a bad year, and maybe you are having a bad year, remember that the financial sector, their year, it's remarkably stable, even for everything, even even for everything that's it's
The
happening.
people you love the most are doing fine, so there's nothing to worry about that.
Yeah, just remember that, especially when they are saying, "What a tough year for us all." You'd be like, "I'd like to see the receipts on your tough year."
Yeah, I want to see your 5-year projections.
Exactly.
Well, that's it for us. On the Scream. It's been a fun year. Thanks for listening in. And happy New Year's.
We'll see you. We'll see you around my birthday, January 7th. It'll be great.
Hey.
Oh. Oh.
Oh. All right. All right. Talk to you.
Bye.